Good afternoon. This is Pastor Schuyler with BereanBaptist.church. I wanted to show you something really wonderful from the book of Job today. We're doing Job in our Wednesday night Bible study, and last night we did Job chapter 19. So let me do a screen share. Job chapter 19 contains one of many people's favorite verses, rightfully so. Job is going through this horrible time in life, and his friends, sort of not friends, have come supposedly to make things better, but they're actually making it worse. And Job has this long, bitter speech, and he's just descending. It's getting worse and worse and worse for Job. He does this a few times in the book where he just pours out a heart of bitter complaints to God, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And there at the bottom of Job's bitter, long speech, there at rock bottom, he looks up and by faith discerns something remarkable. We see that here in Job chapter 19. This comes at the end of a long and bitter speech. And Job, just by something that we have to call prophecy, nothing else can explain it, Job says this: "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another." Job, by faith, has this conviction that he will be redeemed, that he will see God even if he is completely destroyed. This has to be the spirit of prophecy. There's nothing else that could explain this. Remember, Job lived at least as long ago as Abraham, maybe before Abraham. Job didn't have a New Testament. Job didn't have the Old Testament. Yet by faith, Job understands that he will see God. And this is a wonderful passage. It's made even more wonderful when we understand what leads up to it. And especially, I want you guys to see how we get to this phrase, "not another," and why Job says it. So let's look. Let's go up a little bit to the beginning of chapter 19. Job starts talking about what God has done for him. Have you ever shared a testimony about what God has done for you? This is like that, but a little different than most testimonies. Here's what God has done for Job. "He has fenced up the way that I cannot pass. He has set darkness in my paths. He has stripped me of my glory, taken the crown, destroyed me on every side. Hope has he removed, kindled his wrath against me. As one of his enemies, his troops come together." That's what God has done against Job. At this moment, Job doesn't understand why. He feels like he's checked all the boxes. He feels like he's done everything he's supposed to do. And for reasons that Job just cannot understand, it seems like God is out to get him, that God is against him. In reality, we know that God is protecting Job in this moment, but Job doesn't feel that way right now. He feels like God is out to get him. He feels estranged from God. He feels like God is his enemy. And not just God. Look at this estrangement language, this enemy language. It continues. "God has put my brethren far from me. My acquaintances are verily or truly estranged from me. My kinfolk have failed or gone away." Job feels estranged, cut off from God. He also feels alienated, cut off from other people. "My familiar friends have forgotten me." And not just Job's friends and acquaintances and kinship, but even those that used to work for him. "They that dwell in my house, my maids, count me for a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. I called to my servant, and he gave no answer." Job has been brought to such a low state that even the people that used to work for him just completely ignore him. Like how some people might completely ignore a homeless person on the street, somebody begging for help, and they just kind of look through them and pretend that they're not there. That's how low it has gone for Job, and it's even worse than that. "My breath is strange to my wife, though I entreat for the children's sake of my own body." When Job is talking to his wife, even when he's asking her for something in the name of the children that they've lost, Job is a complete stranger to her. That's a poetic phrase. "My breath is strange to my wife." If your breath is ever strange to your wife, something is wrong. Something is seriously wrong. In this case, Job is poetically saying that he is like a stranger to his wife. She ignores his words like she would ignore a complete stranger's words. Yes, in verse 18, "Young children despise me. I arose and they spoke against me." Job has lost kinship and acquaintance. The people that used to work for him pretend he doesn't exist. His wife is like a stranger to him. And the people that used to respect him in the community, now they speak against him and they despise him. All my inward friends abhor me, and they whom I love are turned against me. Job is absolutely alienated, estranged, lonely, cut off from God and from men. And even his own body is turning against him. My bones cleave to my skin and to my flesh. I am escaped with the skin of my teeth. Job looks down at himself, now emaciated, gaunt, diseased, and filthy, and it doesn't even recognize himself anymore. He is about as lonely as a person can be in this moment. He is absolutely alienated and estranged. And that's the context. From that deep pit, Job looks up and by the eyes of faith catches a glimpse of a remarkable mystery. That's the context in which Job says, "Yet in my flesh shall I see God. I shall see for myself." Job doesn't understand why. It seems like God has turned against him. All the people in the world have turned against him. Even his own body is rebelling against him and falling apart. Job's looking at a world destroyed, and he can't understand why this is happening. Nothing makes sense. But he is confident. He is confident that God will redeem him. Somehow, some way, my eyes shall behold, and not another. And this is what I really want to point out to you today. Not another. You see, this is a reasonable way to translate this phrase, not another, but as we have a note here, the Hebrew here is not as a stranger. Not as a stranger. In fact, this note here, not as a stranger, this goes all the way back to the original printing of the King James Bible in 1611. The King James translators recognized that an alternative way to translate this phrase at the end of verse 27 is not as a stranger. And if you find a 1611 Bible, you can look it up, and that reference is in the margins, just like a modern study Bible. So this alternative translation, not as a stranger, helps us to understand what's going on here. Why does Job say not as another? Well, he's talking about himself. He will see God. My eyes shall behold. I will see God for myself in my flesh, and then, finally then, not as a stranger. Job has been estranged from God. God is his enemy. That's not actually true, but Job thinks that right now God is his enemy. He has certainly been estranged from people on earth. He is absolutely lonely. He literally does not have a friend in the world. His own body is turning against him. But Job is absolutely sure that somehow, some way, God will redeem him. And when he finally sees his Redeemer, he will not see him as an enemy and as a stranger, that he will be received by God. That is remarkable faith. That is wonderful faith. And Job is trying to understand why all of these things are happening. He knows that his Redeemer lives, that God will redeem him, but he doesn't understand why. He doesn't understand why he is so lonely, so desolate. But we can see a little bit better, a little bit more of the picture, not because we're better than Job, but because we have the Old Testament and the New Testament, which Job didn't have. And we can remember another one who was lonely, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. We hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Jesus was rejected by men, Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Everybody looked at Jesus and thought, that guy's being judged by God. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. So Job's suffering, Job's crushing loneliness and sense of complete abandonment, all of that looks forward to the Redeemer that Job by faith understood was coming. And when we go through loneliness, when we go through sorrow and despair, depression and isolation, those things in our lives, we can look back to the Redeemer and remember that he has experienced those things too. He has experienced those things too. Despised, not esteemed, smitten of God, stricken and afflicted. He has experienced it. And we can then understand our sufferings as a way to draw closer to him. When we exercise the same kind of faith that Job exercised, when we trust that God will somehow, some way bring us through this and use this circumstance to bring us closer to him, then we exercise the patient faith of Job that the Bible exhorts us to. So I just thought that was really neat. Maybe some of you are lonely now. Maybe some of you are isolated. You feel like you're alone. This certainly is a season for isolation. In those times, understand that your Redeemer lives. Understand that in Christ you will be brought near to God and not as a stranger. And the reason why is because he has borne the true isolation, the true sorrow. He has borne our grief, and by his stripes we have been healed. So I thought that was pretty neat. That's just a very brief summary of some of the stuff we went over on Wednesday night on Bible study. We are doing that pretty consistently. Of course, next Wednesday, we will be Christmas caroling. So we're going to meet here at church at 6:45 and then go out Christmas caroling next Wednesday. That is Wednesday, the 23rd. But I hope this was a blessing to you. I'm Pastor Schuyler with Berean. And until next time, remember to love God, search the scriptures, and love one another. God bless.